All right, this is Rita Carr, Chair of the Nantucket Historical Commission, calling our Friday, October 17th meeting to order at 10 a.m. This meeting is being video and audio recorded and is being conducted in a hybrid format. So I will begin with a roll call of commissioners present. So Barbara Halstead. Here. Betsy Tyler. Here. George Butterworth. Here. Angus MacLeod. Here. Sarah McLean. Here. And I don't see Abby DeMolina here. And then our preservation planner, Holly Beckett, is here. And then we're joined by members of the public in person, Caroline Waltzer. And then online, it looks like we have Ron Cocott and Virginia Vidoni. Great. So first on the agenda is public comment. Is there any public? Oh, sorry. And Hillary had his report. Missed you there. Also on Zoom. So public comment, is there any public comment for items not on our agenda? Great, okay. Hearing none, we can move on to staff update. Holly, is there?
And Abby is here.
Oh, great. And for the record, Abby DeMolina has joined the meeting.
Hi,
yeah.
sorry I'm late.
Oh, no worries.
Good morning. So this past weekend, I had the privilege of representing the town at the First Congregational Church, excuse me, on the rededication of Walter Beinecke's brass plaque. That was pretty fun, and like I said, it was an honor to do that. I was able to speak, as well as Niles Parker from the NHA. Why am I having a blank here? I can think of his name at the moment. It's not in my head, but the executive
Glenn?
director. No, Glenn didn't speak. Of the Conservation Foundation. Cormac. There we go.
Cormac.
Sorry, Cormac. Forgot your name. Which was even though it was blustery and it was during the nor'easter, we did have a good amount of people. So it was a good time. And then they had the spire available for folks to go up into. So that was pretty neat. That's my update.
Great, thank you. All right, so then on the agenda, we have a review and discussion of Articles 1 and 2 for the upcoming special town meeting. So in the packet, we have the full text of both articles, and then a letter received from Caroline Waltzer, specifically relating more to Article 1. I'd love to keep our discussion based on, the merits of these articles as they relate to, sort of our charge as the historical commission, as we sort of discuss whether or not we feel it's appropriate for the NHC to make a comment or a recommendation on either one of these articles, or to just abstain from that, much like the select board did or decided to do in their last meeting. But Caroline, did you want to make it, since you had requested that this be on our agenda? Would you like to?
I made a little statement if I could, and unfortunately my printer wasn't working, so I'll have to read from my phone, so apologies for that.
Yeah, if you would like to come closer to the
Yes.
table, you're welcome to be better captured on the
Get a better look at that very cute dog.
Oh, yes.
It's very sweet. Well, thank you very much for putting these articles on the agenda. I really appreciate it. And I'm eager to hear your thoughts, actually. And I'll read my statement. So I am the citizen drafter of Article 1. Brian Borgensen is not able to be here because he's taking care of his baby this morning, and he and I have collaborated on the article and also our approach to you this morning. We are asking the Historical Commission to review both Article 1 and 2 because we're concerned with some of the arguments that are recently being made against Article 1 having to do with preservation. We feel each article directly affects the preservation of Nantucket's National Historic Landmark designation. And has very different effects on that and the traditional land use patterns that define our island's cultural landscape. Article 1 restores the renting and leasing language that was deleted from the zoning bylaw in 2015 as town council put it, unintentionally, deleted. That omission left all rentals, unfortunately, both long and short term, legally uncertain in our zoning code. And the citizens need to do something about that. Restoring this language protects the very land use patterns and seasonal way of life that the National Park Service recognized as historically significant when it updated Nantucket's National Historic Landmark designation in 2011-2012. As the Nantucket Preservation Trust explained at the time, that update finally acknowledged, quote, a significant part of the island's history, its development in the late 19th and early 20th century as a resort community, and its critical role in the country's preservation movement. With the acceptance of that update, these key elements of the island's historic significance were formally recognized by the federal government. This recognition is not abstract. It affirms that the resort era, with its pattern of seasonal occupancy, cottage rentals, and shared stewardship, is a living component of Nantucket's historic integrity. It means that our preservation ethic and our seasonal economy are intertwined. For over 150 years, middle-class families have maintained Nantucket's little gray ladies by renting them during the summer months. This modest form of hospitality has sustained the upkeep of these dwellings and kept them in the hands of longtime island families. Restricting that practice, as proposed under Article 2, would threaten not just those families, but the fabric of the island's preservation system. When small historic cottages must be sold because owners can no longer generate maintenance income, the pattern has become predictable. Tear down, enlargement, or relocation. Nantucket already exports 17,000 tons of demolition debris annually. I haven't been able to check that exact number this year, but a sign that we are losing historic scale even under existing regulations. To conclude, Article 1 offers a preservation solution through zoning by reaffirming that both short and long-term renting are lawful residential uses. It protects economic diversity and prevents the slow erasure of our authentic landscape. It keeps preservation accessible to those who are not philanthropists, while maintaining the cultural continuity of our seasonal community, the designation that our island just received and ratified. This is the model that earned Nantucket its distinction as one of only a handful of entire communities designated as a National Historic Landmark, meant to illustrate and interpret the heritage of the United States. So if we are significantly reducing visitors to the island, since private home rentals represent 92% of all of our accommodations, that is limiting our ability to illustrate or be interpretive of the heritage of the United States. I thank you for your continued leadership in safeguarding the authenticity and cultural landscape that make Nantucket a National Historic Landmark of special importance. And I hope you'll consider this connection between renting, preservation, and historic continuity in your review of both of the articles. And I'm very grateful that you are if you'll consult into this question.
Thank you. All right, and thank you, Caroline. And I had asked David Iverson if he could join us today, just as he was the author of, or put forth Article 2, but he was unable, had a conflict and couldn't join us. So thoughts on on both of these articles from the commissioners as a jumping off point?
I would just like to publicly state I am a public backer of Article 2 at the request of the Nantucket Land Council, and they do feel that it will help preserve all kinds of aspects of the island. It's a good compromise. It's not as restrictive as some of us would like to see, but it's certainly more restrictive than Article 1. And I would just, when I spoke at town meeting against the efforts to make change zoning so that you could do short-term rentals anywhere on the island. I gave the example of the Caton's former house on Caton Circle. That's a house that was a year-round family house. When it came up on the market, it sold. They stuck a swimming pool in the backyard. They rented by the week for $18,000 a week, and I guarantee you, nothing was preserved in the house. The house was completely gutted with a swimming pool in the backyard, but some investor is making a whole lot of money who never stays there. And I think that is what Nantucket is, that is exactly what Nantucket is currently all about. Buy it, gut it, and rent it as many times as you can for as much as you can. And I don't see how that helps preserve houses or keep Nantucketers in their house.
Sarah.
So I can speak directly to that. I don't love the idea of allowing rentals across island wide, but I also don't understand how we can figure out a way to monitor the restrictive nature of Article 2. I think that it financially puts a huge burden on coming up with those dollars for the town, the 2.5 million that the finance department decided we would lose, and then all of the economic unintended consequences of loss would make a huge impact. But specifically in terms of allowing someone to preserve a house and then rent it to recoup some of that loss, I can speak directly to that, because having done that and understanding firsthand how much it costs to actually preserve a property here, one of the only ways that I have to recoup that is to rent the house out short term. I have the ability to have, there's a small second dwelling on the property. I could do the hosted stay. So I'm not really afraid of being, not being able to do that entirely, but I can tell you that, restricting the number of days for short-term rentals is not really going to have the benefit of providing more houses for year-round residents, because even if more houses come on the market, there's very few people that can afford a $3.5 to $4 million house that live here year-round. And so if you're saying that, oh, these short-term rentals aren't viable anymore, so there's going to be a flood at the market of all of these houses coming on, and it's going to drop the price, I don't necessarily believe that would happen. I think it would affect the economy far greater for the people that work here and generate their income on the island. And I do find that the number of days is extremely restrictive. It effectively eliminates all of the shoulder season where we're trying to get people to come here. And, frankly, a lot of the reason people come here is because of the historic nature of the island. And so if all of a sudden we're saying, oh, you can only come if you can afford to stay 7 days, only in the summer, and we're not going to host any of these other things, it would be decimating to this island and the economy. And so, no, I don't love allowing short-term rentals across island wide, but I think of the two options, we have to choose one or the other. And I'm going to vote for number one because I can't stomach number two, just for the sake of the people on the island. And I love historic preservation, but I don't see, people they need that money to put back into their homes. So 2 cents.
Thank you, Sarah.
I would just like to say, you're not required to vote for either one of these.
That's,
No,
yeah,
we're not.
that's very true.
Let's make that perfectly clear.
Mhm.
Right.
Well, okay, so if we're not required to vote for either one, we're left with what the judge has put into place. Is that correct? That would stand, the ruling that the judge put
Well,
into place?
Being appealed at the moment, I believe, but
So then it's sort of up in the air.
Mhm.
So
yeah.
those would be the
it's-
3
it's not-
options.
Yeah, we know
Yeah,
where we are right now.
okay. Well,
Rita?
Yes, Abby, sorry, thanks.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure sometimes people can't see. I tend to agree, I think, with Sarah in that I think I have a lot of the same concerns of I just think the restrictiveness nature is too restrictive in that it won't allow the island to be accessible to people who might not have really extensive means, and making the island only available to the wealthy. I'm just not comfortable with that. And as Sarah pointed out, we're saying this is a historic landmark and we want people to know about it, but then if we're not making the island accessible to the very people we want to share it with, I think that's just tough for me. I won't repeat all the stuff that Sarah said because I think she made some really good points, but the idea that, you'd only be able to come for a week and in the summer, that's a lot of money for people to come and spend. And I just think that the idea that that's the only way you'd be able to come here, or you could stay at a hotel, but I think everyone knows that the hotels here are not affordable either. So that really is leaving no affordable options for people. And I just feel like if we want to provide accessibility, I think that that would be my concern. But I do agree also with Sarah in that I don't think we should have like no ways to make sure that we're regulating this. I view that if Article 1 passes, I would also like to see very soon after more regulation put in place. But I just feel like, I think the point she made about the restrictiveness, it's just too much, and I would be afraid of the economic harm to island residents, and like I said, the lack of accessibility to people who may not be incredibly wealthy, like people who only come for a night, people who might come for a weekend. Those people would be completely boxed out unless people say they could come during the shoulder season, but then it looks like the prices during the shoulder seasons will also be extremely expensive. I worry about it not being accessible to people who want to be able to come here. And but I think George made a good point. If we're not sure, we could always just say that we're really not going to take any action on either article if people don't feel strongly one way, or people feel like we don't have a say, and that is what the select board did. So I would recommend if people aren't comfortable, that then we have this discussion, but then we don't necessarily have to take a position one way or the other.
Thank you, Abby.
Well, it seems to me that if the language was inadvertently deleted in 2015 from the zoning bylaw, that it makes sense to put it back in, which is pretty much what Article 1 wants to do.
Mhm.
And then, as Abby said, after that, maybe it's time to think about how to regulate it.
How is it accidentally up?
And that's what I'm wondering
Yeah.
too.
Things are very intentional.
Yeah,
Accidentally on purpose.
yeah.
I think with the point that Sarah made sense to me, that it's an incentive to people to restore homes if they know they can recoup some of the expense by short-term renting it. I think that's important.
I would like to say that the percentage of people who use the money to restore homes as compared to destroy homes is about 25-1 in favor of destroying.
Right, better than none. I mean, I know a couple myself where they have done that, like Michelle Elsick.
Mhm.
She's an example.
Yep.
Mhm.
I don't know if they would have been able to do that if she had any residential short-term renting. You could,
Madam Chair. And also, I mean, people that come and stay in, for instance, Michelle's house, or other homes that have been restored, they're actually getting to see what this house can look like with all of the amenities in place. They're not worried that, things are rickety and whatever, and in most cases are beautiful. I mean, Michelle's house is beautiful. It rents all the time. And so those people are getting that experience and they can look around and see the historic fabric of these houses still in place. And, I agree with George in that there's plenty of people that come in, they buy houses and they tear everything out. But those same people are going to do that no matter what, whether we allow them to short-term rent or not short-term rent. I feel like you're going to have people that aren't necessarily of the same mindset that are going to continue to destroy the fabric of our homes no matter what we do. So at least this allows the people that do want to be able to do that and do it well to recoup some of those expenses, because it is not the same price to restore it as if you were to just go in and gut it.
But the point also is, so the restoration is even more expensive than the gut. That's why people gut. I'm told you can save $1 to $2 million on restoring the house by gutting it.
That's
And
not restoring.
so the
That's
people who
actually-
truly restore it, I mean, they're gonna have to charge at least the $18,000. We're not gonna be bringing the middle class people here to see Nantucket and these incredibly restored either to tasteful restorations or gut restorations.
Yeah, I mean,
There's
the
no such
price of
thing
the
as gut
rentals is
restoration.
not gonna
Respectfully,
be-
sorry.
That's an oxymoron.
That is a
The vast-
total oxymoron.
Which
So,
they-
with all due respect to what you just said. I don't even, what was the word you just said?
Gut
Gut
restoration.
restoration, there's no such thing if you
Renovation.
look at the 4 classifications of preservation, so I just wanted to.
Right, well,
mention
it's
that. I'd be
used in
remiss if I
real
didn't
estate
say
circle all the time, like Captain, who's the black captain whose house was right
That's Bowen
five
Bach.
houses.
Yeah.
The people who did that house said it was lovingly restored. It was lovingly restored with a backhoe, you know, I mean, it's just, the word restoration is used by many people in very different ways.
Well, as the, Madam Chair, through you, as the Preservation Planning Advisory Commission, on behalf of the town, we need to be very careful on the terminology that this board uses when it comes to preservation. So again, I'd be
did
remiss if I
little
didn't say that.
Restoring the house,
Yes, yes, but yeah,
updating.
renovating. Yes. Angus, did you have any thoughts?
Well, I'm glad that, there are members of the public who have come to speak on this, and I appreciate, Caroline's input, and I'm just, before speaking, I wanted to know if anyone else from the public wanted to speak on this.
Yes, I do see, Hillary has her hand raised. I just, before we go to the public, I just wanted, as a commissioner, would like to weigh in, and then we can hear from the public. Yeah, I think when we talk about like the history of Nantucket short-term, you know, before it was called short-term rentals, obviously, we do have this long history of people renting out, you know, rooms in their houses or, you know, their cottage and that's, I think, protected under Article 2 because that a lot of that historic uses and that's what in Article 2 would be defined as a hosted stay. So I think there obviously is a way to continue on with that historic land use pattern of, you know, people on Nantucket renting their homes or renting a room in their home. That's not the same intensive use of short-term rentals that we see today, where it's, you know, I think the popularity of short-term rentals on this island, to George's point, is putting a lot of pressure on historic properties that, you know, there are people like yourself, Sarah, and, you know, who are doing a fantastic job with historically sensitive, real, you know, rehabilitations or restorations of historic homes, not these gut rehabs, but I do think there is a pressure to make sure, you know, that every bedroom has an ensuite bath, that you've got a pool, that you've got, you know, an open concept floor plan that like people are, you know, are looking for. So that is something that makes me uncomfortable with Article 1. And I would more favor Article 2, which does allow for short-term rentals with certain, you know, guide rails. I think that's the term that the planning board used in their recommendation. And something that came up in the planning board meeting on October 9th is that I think it was a narrative study that said, you know, that over 80% of short-term rentals on Nantucket are owned by people who are not Nantucket voters. And that really stuck out to me as something that's not in keeping with the historic, you know, rent, like what we were seeing, you know, 100 years ago or 50 years ago. I think it was probably much more a flip where it was probably 80% or something like that of rentals were owned by Nantucketers, by people who reside and vote on Nantucket. So I do think, while we have this long history, I think, you know, things have really changed in the last few years, and that's why over every town meeting for the last 5 years, you know, we've seen articles trying to tackle this issue. So that's just my 2 cents, but if there's no more commissioner comments, I would like to open it up to the public. So Hillary Rayport, I know your hand was raised first.
Yeah, Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for recognizing me. So I'm an elected member of the planning board, as you all know, and I did vote with the majority on this topic. I haven't been asked to come here by the planning board. I'm just here as an individual. And, I also have a strong background in preservation, a degree in preservation, and used to chair this board. So I I'm not going to be advocating for one or the other. I think the focus of this group should be on preservation and is on preservation and what's best for the island. I do think that there's some considerations that I hope get widely thought about by the voting public who has an important decision to make. And I do agree that you don't have to vote for either of these articles. And also the articles can be amended. So one of the things that was disappointing for me personally about the way this has all happened is as the planning board in August decided that, we were going to be leading the discussion and coming up with something that we felt would bring people together in the in the community and get a majority of votes. And that we had like 6 months to do that. And then because of the special town meeting being called by petition, that none of that happened. So if both of these articles fail, which they may well do, I think we will see more study. And I hope that that does include more surveys of what people are really doing. I think that we have some data, but folks are throwing economic arguments around, and we haven't ever commissioned an economic study. Like Provincetown commissioned a whole economic study about how different approaches to short-term rentals would affect Provincetown, and that was done by the University of Massachusetts, and it's really useful. So we are trying to kind of muddle through and do the right thing. It is some of the facts that informed my vote were ones that Rita mentioned, that these limits, whether you think they're not restricted enough or too restrictive, roughly coincide with how people are renting their homes. Like most people would not, some people would need to curtail their number of rentals and how much they're renting, but like 80 to 90% of people would not have to do anything different. That was a compelling fact for me. The other compelling fact was what's been mentioned in the discussion, which is the hosted stay. There will be plenty of rentals available to people who want to rent for weekends in the season, because if you have a year-round rental in your cottage, or you live on your property and rent your cottage or rent your main house, you have no limits on how much you can short-term rent. If you have a property that you don't live in very much and you rent out the cottage and the main house, you might be motivated and compelled to decide to rent your cottage to a school teacher or a carpenter. And the reason why you would be compelled to do that is because you don't have any restrictions and you can rent your other house 365 days per year. So you would make up, what we were doing is these, what the planning board comment called was appropriate limits, actually create a policy motivation for people to make more housing available to year-round renters. And I just feel like that's not been talked about enough. People are saying, well, I need my house. How am I I'm not going to be able to buy a bigger house, but it's not the ownership. We really don't have enough year-round rentals. So if we have policies that promote people to rent year-round, that's helpful. And the town of Nantucket is currently paying people who are currently short-term renting their homes. We're paying them with taxpayer dollars to rent them to long-term people instead. So you would be able to, if you had a house with 2 properties, and again, 70 to 80% of homes on Nantucket are owned by people who are vacationers, who have second home. These are second homes. So even though there's a lot of discussion, and it's very important about how locals who rent, people who live year round are renting, most of the homes are not occupied year round. So you can be paid to rent part of your home, like an apartment or cottage, to someone year round, and you can then rent, every single day of the summer season. So I think that is an aspect which may or may not sway people, but it is real and it is part of this. The last thing I want to say is I would really like to see the NHC. I hope the NHC becomes an advocate for some of these, for some bylaws or policies that we could promote. For example, I would really like to see, if we do have limits on short-term rentals, I would really like to see historic preservation tax credit projects exempted from those limits. And a historic preservation tax credit project has to be income producing and not used as a residence for 5 years. So the exemption could be a 5-year exemption, and we could explore, the NHC could explore developing this as a bylaw. And I think it would really bring a lot of attention to historic preservation tax credits. The only HPTC projects that we've seen recently have been for short-term rentals. So it's the only tool we have to preserve the inside of houses. And if we exempt them and let these projects have short-term rentals, we'll see more of them, but only if we put limits on short-term rentals. So if we put limits on short-term rentals, then we can waive the limits for the right kind of use, such as where there's a year-round person living on the property or where it's a preservation project. I had one other thing I thought NHC could advocate for. Again, this is where research could really help, and we've had plenty of time. We've been talking about this for 6 years, but we haven't done the research, which is, are there like unwinterized cottages, cottage colonies that are really historic? I know there are. The question is, we haven't surveyed them, we haven't documented them. These could be historic cottage colonies, historic rental cottages, and we could exempt those from any restrictions. But again, if you don't put the restrictions in place, you basically don't have any kind of tool to give waivers to the preferential use. So those are just some, so I would just say that those are, a couple ways that the NHC could advocate to bring more preservation by having some restrictions and then waiving them when you want to see that kind of use in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Kathy Baird?
Hi. Thank you for recognizing me. That is my non-historic house. It's supposed to look like one, but it's really only 35 years old. Thank you for letting me speak. I've never listened to folks on this commission. I appreciate the work that you do. It's very, very important. Just so you know who I am, if you've never met me before. So I'm the secretary of the advisory committee of non-voting taxpayers, and you had mentioned some information about non-voting taxpayers, and I just wanted to clarify some of that because I've done a lot of research on it. I'm also a person who does short-term at my house to be able to keep it and keep it from my kids. It pays basically the part of the cost of maintaining it, but it's certainly not making any money off of it. So couple of things on non-voting taxpayers. For at least the last 2 decades, the percentage of homes owned by seasonal people, part-time residents, if you will, is about 60%. It goes up and down, 60, 65, but it pretty much stays around 60%. So 60% of the homes on the island are not lived in year-round. I found it interesting, too, that it's a common perception that most people who are not seasonal residents rent their homes, and the actual answer is only about 20% of them do. So I'm on an appointed board by the town on this advisory committee, and there are 15 members, and there are only 2 members who rent their homes. So by and large, if you're talking about seasonal home teardowns and destruction of things that should be preserved, I would say that you can't just point to short-term rentals as being heavily involved in that. People who don't need to rent maybe they're even more likely because they have the money to take one of these houses and gut them. So I don't think we should only be pointing the finger at the people who do rent, because it's a lower percentage of them that do rent. If you think about it, only 11% of all of the homes on Nantucket are rented short-term. And so that is a fairly consistent number as well. And I think most the people, I think year-round people rent their house at about the same percentages as the non-voting taxpayers. And then one more thing, two more things actually. So people who were speaking earlier about the average renters, according to NAREB, rent according to what the restrictions in Article 2 now talk about. That means that there is a number of people who rent far less, and there's a number of people who rent far more. So the people who are being hurt are the people who rent more than those days, or don't follow one of the restrictions. So for example, if you wanted to rent in the summertime for 3 days, in making the intensity less in the summertime, you really wouldn't be able to do that. I'm one of the people who does that. You have to do a 7-day minimum. I like to rent once a week. So I'm still only renting my house once a week, but for 3 days. So it's affordable for some of the people you were talking about who can come here for only a weekend. I wouldn't be able to do that anymore. I would have to rent for a full week. And to me, that would be more impact on my neighborhood, on resources and so forth. So that's a concern to me personally on Article 2. And then one of the things that Hillary mentioned about cottages and the hosted stays is assuming that people have separate places in their homes or have a cottage that they could rent out. My neighborhood, there are very few. There are very tiny lots. There's no cottages. We're on septic, and it would be very expensive to put a cottage in. But just to assume that somebody has a cottage that they could rent, no, to do a hosted stay my house there is 1,250 square feet. I don't have a cellar. I don't have a garage. I don't have any other spaces. So it's a disadvantage to me for homes that are not the great big McMansion homes and so forth, the smaller homes, which many of the old ones are, to talk about the hosted stay or making that something that's not an impact to people. Appreciate what you guys are doing again. Thank you for talking about this today and for letting me speak.
Thank you. Are any other thoughts from, Caroline?
If I may, I wanted to address just a couple of things. I'm listening to the conversation that perhaps I didn't include that I think are important for a balanced conversation. One is I want to point out that over the last 4 years, our community has picked for restrictions and regulations. And obviously, I'm a proponent for the historic tourism model. Maybe there's an easy way to say this, but I think that Act Now has helped ensure our Nantucket rental model, in that there has been advocacy over 4 years for things like, if these are the ones that we've selected as voters. We have banned investor REITs. We have banned corporate ownership. We have established a local registry, which is actually a really big deal and very helpful to our community. And we've also implemented health and safety, Board of Health ability to have oversight, which means enforcement, and it means reliable enforcement. And I just want to point out, because maybe some of you don't follow that part of things, I'm talking about there was a slow start to a lot of it, unfortunately, as the town tried to implement it. I don't think there was any nefarious means involved in that. It was just, as municipalities go. But we're really only just seeing some of that begin in the last 12 months. And this is really, I think, going to help the whole community feel that we've done something already to properly ensure the Nantucket model, which I feel is really different than any other location of renting. And this is getting lost in our need to argue about these things, but Nantucket does renting in a very unique and special way. I think we're actually very good at it. I know that there have been problem properties during the pandemic, but just to say that there are very good restrictions and regulations in place. The other thing I just wanted to mention is posted stays historically, and this I got from, I read a lot about history around here, and also Michael Harrison gave a very good lecture in 2023 for the resort era exhibit at the NHA. And I really enjoyed that. I learned so much, and I read a whole bunch more after that. But interestingly, and I did find this out after that lecture, I went to the town clerk and found out that in the late 1900s, there were year-round people. It was like down to 4,000 people. And it was the height of our resort era. You know, we had so many hotels, we had people jam-packing the island, and they have numbers. In fact, in 1927, they had 39% of all the dwellings on Nantucket were booked as summer rentals. And that you can establish that fact by looking at the town clerk's office records and also the Inquirer Mirror, where all individually were listed so that people could find each other in the era before cell phones. And I find that very interesting because now we only have 11% rented, and we had a very small year-round population in that year. So 80% of homes owned on Nantucket as being off-island residents is actually, that has been true roughly since the turn of the century. It is actually part of our historic land ownership. And I can get some more figures on that. And I finally wanted just to point out also that Edward Underhill, who I'm sure some of you know about, Wisconsin, he had 35 cottages at the, again, late 1900s, that he rented solely to vacationers. He and his wife stayed in different ones, and his daughter and wife inherited them. But that is traditional on this island. Corkish cottages, Wade cottages. There's some out in Brant Point that don't exist anymore. Actually, quite a few of these types of places have gone by the wayside, and we've lost that historic use. So anybody now who owns more than one dwelling and who rents at time to time those two dwellings is in that model of Nantucket. And I do want to make note of that. And finally, just a little small joke. I live in a 102-year-old house that my great grandmother built, and instead of having a bathroom for each bedroom, as is the new way people do it, suburban style, we have Nantucket sinks, Wisconsin sinks in each bedroom, which we have absolutely preserved. Very expensive to preserve, the old plumbing. And I just wanted to say that we have enjoyed renting our house since the 1960s to visitors. And the amount of appreciation for people noticing, because we've kept it all exactly the same as my great grandmother had it. And it is extremely expensive to do that, but we wouldn't have it any other way. And there are many, many people who feel the same because we all adore our family houses. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, any other? Angus,
If we don't have anyone else speaking on
oh, there's a hand raised online, but,
it, okay.
okay. Well,
Oh,
Hillary, I can, yeah.
oh, thank you. Just a
Good.
couple things. I just wanted to address the 11% of the houses are being short-term rental. So I asked where this figure came from. That's based on the registration. And I think what it shows is that, well, so we are designated a seasonal community. We were given that option by the state, and we adopted it at our last town meeting. And in order to qualify there as a seasonal community, one of the qualifications is that a significant portion of the houses are being used as short-term rentals. as well as vacation homes. And Kathy is correct. The state found that a little over 60% of the homes are on Nantucket, the structures are seasonally used, second homes or more than that. Other estimates have found 72%, but we can use 60. But then as far as the number of homes that are short-term rentals, the state is using the number of 22%. And the number of 11% is coming from the local registry, which really indicates that there are many people who are renting but haven't registered yet. And that number has been slowly going up as people register. It's also worth considering just generally that if you have a home and you rent it for no more than a total of 14 days in the year, it is not considered a short-term rental and you don't have to register. And you can rent it for, 4 days, anytime. So that's another source of inventory of this, majority of structures that are short-term rentals, that are second homes, where we will have inventory of short-term rentals coming on because some people rent the minimum to not have, they also don't have to pay any tax on their income if they only rent for 2 weeks. So I just wanted to add those additional comments about, as you consider the facts. I know it's not always factual. Thanks. I mean, it's not
Thank
just
you.
about facts, it's about emotion. Thanks.
Okay, I'll go to Angus and then to
Okay.
you, Sarah.
Go ahead. Sam.
I just had a question. For clarification, it's my understanding that you need to register with the town no matter how many days you rent. And that's more of they want to know, and it has nothing to do with the taxes or anything else. It's more health and safety. And so I know that none of the real estate agents will even touch your property unless you have that registered with both the town and the state. So I'm not sure how that 14-day, I understand from a tax perspective, you don't have to tell anyone about it, but I do believe that you still have to register with the town and the state to have any sort of rental in your property.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Does anybody else know? Because my understanding from having spoken with Brian Turbert and other folks about this is that if you're only renting for 2 weeks, you don't have to register, but there might be some people on the call who, I know you don't have to register with the state. And I don't think you have to
Yeah.
register with the town.
Kathy has her hand
yeah.
raised.
Yeah, thank you. Kathy, do you know the answer to this question?
Well, first of all, the state has an ad-only database, so it's really hard to know where they're getting their number from. If I have, in the state, for example, there are 6 or 7 on my street that are registered with the state, and all they provide is the street name, not the number. And basically what that shows is as a home is registered with the state, if I sell it tomorrow, somebody buys it, they're going to re-register it under their name and it stays there. So it counts multiple times. No, the number will never go down in the state database because it's a free registry. You never can take your name off of it. So it'll always have higher numbers as properties exchange hands and as people come on and off the use of the state registry. So those numbers are always going to be higher than the town. And you may be right. I know that one, either the state or the town, one requires the 14-day people to register and the other doesn't. So that does account for a number of people that don't count as short-term rentals and only do that 14 days. So it's hard to take the number that the state has because it's basically going to be bigger always, because you cannot get off of that database. Even if you sell your property, it stays on there forever as an STR that's counted.
Thank you.
Yes. I think it's a good point. We don't have to vote for either article, and I'm not sure that that either one is written the way I would want to approve something. all I know is that the status quo is not working for Nantucket and it's not working for preservation on Nantucket. I think that there are very few exceptions, Sarah, one of them, to having an intention to rent and preserve at the same time. This is anecdotal, but it's 40 years of building and design and being on the HDC and the advisory boards and historical commissions, preservation commissions, or board or organizations. It's a rare thing for someone who's wanting to rent to preserve. And most of the development that I see for maximizing profit, as George has mentioned, is facilitating amenities, maximizing bedrooms, square footage. So I know that the status quo is not working, and I believe that Article 1 is basically legalizing the status quo. Article 2, again, is not exactly what I would have written, but I feel like it's a step in the right direction. The local registry is a issue for people to actually sign up for that. Caroline, as you admitted in the town meeting, you hadn't registered yet. Rentals were still continuing. Underhill is a good example of early a development for rentals, strictly for rentals. They were all built for that. They were based on historic precedent of the whaling cottages that at the time were from the early 1700s, and these were being built at the end of the 1800s. But it was the scale and the sensitivity to design that worked with the landscape and the island and the history of the island that made those work. And thank goodness they, for the most part, are intact, all at about 1,000 square feet apiece. There's only one right now that's wanting to double in size by an applicant. But I think that those are, they're examples that aren't really representative of what is going on now. I feel like the island's history and preservation are being degraded by the current system. So I would either, I don't know if the goal today is to go to town meeting with our thumbs up or down for these articles, and I think we should probably vote on that, but I know that I can't support Article 1. Thank you.
Sarah?
Sorry, I agree that the current system is degrading the historic fabric of the island. And I think we can all agree for that. I don't think that the short-term rental aspect is what's necessarily causing that. I can list 2 houses on India Street, one on Main Street, and I'm sure there's a whole host of others, but those are the ones that come to mind very quickly, where the interior fabric of the houses have been destroyed. And probably not one of them will be short-term rented.
Right.
So I think that it has more, we're penalizing and sort of throwing out the short-term rental as this is the problem and we need to somehow, contain that and restrict it exponentially to prevent this fabric from disappearing. And I just want to, sort of say that the fabric is disappearing and maybe there's a much better way that we could somehow prevent that. But I don't believe that limiting the short-term rentals is going to necessarily do that. Those people have more money than they know what to do with. They're never going to rent those houses out, and they don't need to, but they also are not committed to preserving the interior of those spaces. And I'm sure that if we walked around town, we would be able to count 10 or 15 of those types of houses that have either in the process of doing that right now or have done it recently. So yes, short-term rentals puts a strain on the island, but I also feel like we need to look at the economic benefit of what that brings to the people that live on this island, because I think we owe it to them. And then, yes, maybe there is a compromise in between, but we're not given that compromise right now unless we vote no on both of those and go back to the drawing board. And then I also think we run the risk of having the judge come back down and sort of tell us what we're going to do without us having any control over that.
Yes.
Holly?
I'd be remiss if I didn't say anything because my grandfather's rolling around his grave right now. But thank you, Sarah, because you hit the nail on the head. Absolutely. And what we're doing is we're putting short-term rental as the ugly word, and we're gonna hinder, what Nantucket has been, because, we think that short-term rentals is the reason why we're losing historic structures. Well, I think if you take it back and look at our history of renting, what sustained this island since the end of the whaling era, people coming to Nantucket, going out to Sconset, Underhill coming to Nantucket from New York City, creating, because he appreciated the whale cottages and how they were constructed. He wanted to do that, right? Then you have other people that were building. We have our historic survey effort that we had down in Brant Point. I'm looking at one survey that we had recently done by a pal on East Lincoln. These are the Elmore Swains. These are the Elmore Taylor. You have these are local contractors building. And you know what this one's called? This one's called the Ralph Mary Coleman Rental Cottage. Rental. I mean, I think we think that renting is a new phenomenon within the last 20 years. It's not. It's not. And this whole concept of, oh, well, people are coming to Nantucket, buying houses, gutting them, turning them. Yes, there are people, but we've done some guardrails already in the last couple of years. So property rights is big. It's important. That's part of a Nantucket thing. And I would be remiss if I didn't say anything on that. I think that this commission is taking a smart approach of not voting. I would highly recommend that, like the other boards and commissions, but looking at this from a preservation perspective is, I think, important, because it's not just preservation of structures, it's a preservation of people. If Article 2 gets put in my personal opinion, you're gonna see a lot of locals leaving. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Yeah, I don't think anyone is saying that rentals are something that's new. We know we have that long history, including all on Grand Point, but yeah. Oh, shoot. Virginia, I know you took your hand down, but your hand was raised earlier. Would you like to speak? Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I guess can I take my video off? Yes, there I am. Hi. Hi, I'm not great at doing this, so I apologize for all the flustering I'm gonna have. We came to the island in 1999. We were latecomers. We fell in love with the island, and we owned a house in Codfish Park, which was a historic house, is a historic house, and we loved it dearly. We had 2 kids in college. We were working in Pennsylvania, and we rented it, and we were in it a lot, and we preserved it. We really worked hard on that house to preserve it. It's a beautiful little house with a beautiful backyard and a tiny little cottage. We ended up having to sell it because our family was getting huge, and we couldn't fit them all in 150 square feet. So we moved to Quidnet, and we bought a place in 2004. It's 3 acres. It's built by a builder on Nantucket who built it in the old way. It has wide plank, beautiful floors. It's got it's just gorgeous, and it's not big, but it's on 3 acres. So we rent, and we are here between 4 to 5 months a year, and we rent because we have to. We cannot support this huge property without renting, and the restrictions are too much. I mean, what we'll have to do is cut back on every local person who helps us maintain this property. Our next door neighbor is a family that's lived, they have They have vacationed here. Oh, by the way, all of our visitors that come here are families with grandmothers and cousins and kids and dogs. And we do not have a pool, by the way. Our next door neighbor, who also does not have a pool, has 2 houses. They're also 3 acres. They have been here, oh gosh, out of 50 years, they've been coming with their family, and they rented until they could afford to build. So they have a son and whose family lives full-time on Nantucket. They will not survive these restrictions. And what will happen if we have to sell and they have to sell is that someone's going to buy this property. And like what happened across the street from us, they're going to build a huge pool. They're going to blow out our house. They're going to knock it down and they're going to build a huge, gigantic house. And that's the same thing that's going to happen next door. And these properties back up to conservation. They're just beautiful and we love it. And to eliminate people who adore this island and work hard to maintain these beautiful properties doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense to me. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And we're here at our house and we're so lucky. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. All right, commissioners, any other?
By the way, I just want to throw out, did you know that Nantucket is now a verb? Provincetown says they do not want the town to be Nantucketized. They don't want to go the way we're going. So they want more restrictions, try to preserve housing for locals. Not just, anyway, just thought to throw that out.
So, I mean, we have a decision to make. Do we want to vote to support either one of these articles or to essentially take no action and let it go to the town meeting floor, without our vote? I personally, that would be my preference because I think there doesn't see, if we took a vote on either one, I think sounding like from our conversations, it would be pretty split with the commissioners, and I don't necessarily see the value in that going to town meeting if we're saying, oh, it was 4-3. I also think, this is something that, the planning board has weighed in on and FinCom, and in my view, I think we should let this go to town meeting. I know at annual town meeting, we took a vote and I got up there to say, oh, we supported the 4181L, article. I don't know what impact that had. So that's my feeling.
I agree, Rita. I feel the same way. I feel like I mean, realistically, I don't think what we're going to say is going to change people's minds anyway, but I do think like from a perspective, if we don't have like a unified recommendation, we should just take no action because this, we didn't develop these articles. This isn't something that was like promoted by us. Whereas I think we could focus our energy for town meeting when it's something that we're going to be really integrally involved in going forward, personally.
Thank you, Abby. Any other thoughts?
I agree.
I agree.
Okay. So do we need a motion to not make a motion?
Make a motion, we not make a motion.
Okay.
I think do we say a motion to take no action or something? I don't know.
Motion to take no action.
Sure, take no action. Okay, motion to take no action made by George. Is there a second? Seconded by Sarah. So on that motion, aye from Barbara, Betsy, George, Angus,
Aye.
Sarah, and Abby.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. So that is unanimous. Thank you all for members of the public who joined. Hillary, did you have a comment?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say, who knows what's going to happen at town meeting? The island is so split, and I just feel like we are really missing information. So wherever we end up after this meeting, I bet there's still going to be more work to be done. I don't think either of these articles really capture what's needed. I'm just saying that because that's personally what I believe as an individual. And I really hope that this commission might get more involved with helping figure out, really what is the impact on preservation about how Nantucket is running right now. It needs more study. I would really like to see an economic study, and I would really like to see more preservation tax credits, which of course require rentals. They don't have to be short-term rentals. They could be long-term rentals. But if we're going to have subsidies to encourage long-term rentals from programs like the Rooted Rentals and Lease to Locals, maybe that could be combined with the preservation tax credits. And maybe we could study some of these cottages that, like the Corkish cottages or the Wade cottages that were mentioned, and other cottages. I'd just really like to see the partnership between the boards in that way. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Hillary. Sarah?
Through Madam Chair. So in terms of like historic tax credits, so speaking from personal experience, economically, it's very challenging to get the numbers to make sense. So the amount of money that one needs to spend to get those tax credits, go through the process, and then how sort of little you get back, the numbers don't, like if you're renting, even if you're renting long-term and you get the subsidy from Act Now or the town in terms of now it's a long-term rental, you've spent so much money to renovate or get that home back up to, where it is, that economically speaking, it's very hard to make those numbers work. And so for the people that need to rent, they're probably not the same people that are going to apply for historic tax credits. So that's just something to think about. It would be great to be able to say that it's an easier process and that it's open to more people, but that is not the reality.
Thank you. All right, well, thanks again, everybody who joined online. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda, we have updates on our historic resource surveys, starting off with the money which we received through the wind fund for an the RFQ that went out to survey historic town-owned resources. And we did receive a response to that from Paleo West LLC, which is doing business as Chronicle Heritage. That response was in our packet for today. Holly, do you want to expand on this a little bit?
Yes, we have moved forward with this consultant. And there, I believe, was on the agenda for the select board for their approval for the town manager to sign the contract. And I think we're just wrapping that contract up. So as soon as finance sends it to me with it fully executed, and then Chronicles will reach out to me to start our engagement. So we'll probably have a little kickoff meeting, maybe myself and chair. With this, there won't be this consultant won't be physically coming to one of our meetings or zooming in. However, they will be obviously engaged. So that was one of the things that they didn't want to be able to attend. But they'll be coming to Nantucket, doing their survey work. And again, this is for town-owned historic resources, including not just buildings, but our monuments and those type of things. So very excited that this went through. This was a mostly the wind farm funding. I learned a hard lesson. I'm gonna ask for more next time. I didn't ask for enough. So there was some little money that came from our professional services and plus. So thank you to.
Right, because this one response was about 5,000 over the $25,000 from the wind fund. So I'm glad we were able to bridge that gap so we can move forward with this, consultant who you can see from the packet. I can put together a impressive response to the RFQ. And though they haven't worked on Nantucket previously, they do have Massachusetts experience.
Yes.
And Holly, did you contact their references?
Yes, I did get one back, and it was the one in Massachusetts. And so this company is kind of a conglomerate of other companies that kind of got bought by one another. So they did say that one of the people, that they work with, they appreciate in the work that they did for. And one of the things that I like the fact that they've had Massachusetts experience, so they know what MHC is looking for. That's something that's not, you know, even though that this particular branch out of this that we'll be dealing directly with are out of New York, they know Massachusetts requirements, because at the end of the day, even though this is not an MHC funded project, it will still go to them after our review for them to approve the forms and put them in macros.
Right,
So they
still
need to
have be
be,
able to
exactly,
fill out those Form Bs to a standard that will be
exactly. And
accepted by the MSP.
A's.
Yeah.
there'll be a few forms, so we'll see those as well.
So Holly, can we get a list of those 30 resources?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That in the RFP, I put the list that we created from the survey plan. There, in that survey plan, we had a list, yeah, I think it's in there. We also added, so there was a statement that said, and what other ones that the preservation planner will provide to the consultant.
Okay.
And that includes, for instance, the Civil War monument that does not have an old survey. That includes, the Founder's Cemetery on Cliff Road. Both of those do have old MHC numbers, but obviously the formatting of that is completely different. So those are the type of things. Anything that is a town resource, the Viola Franklin Monument on Matticat Road, believe it or not, that's technically land bank / town owned, from 1900, and the DAR locally has been maintaining it. So those things that need to be, surveyed appropriately, so.
Yeah, so I think for our next meeting, perhaps we can, I'll circulate the list that was provided to the consultants, and we can all, if there's anything missing from that list, we can
I can
look to
update it.
identify by them so that we can make sure we're,
Yes,
we have comprehensive, list for them to work from.
Yeah.
So I think it's great that, we're moving forward with this,
Yes.
and, yeah, getting that rolling. And then, Holly, did you have any update on the Massachusetts Historical Commission funding, and where does that RFP stand?
yes, so, as of this week, I think it was Tuesday, sorry, it's a short week, so everything's smooshed together. I received the fully executed contract, so sent that off to finance.
With the state.
The state, so basically, as you remember, we received funding, the MHC's fiscal 23 funding that we've had extended. We had a
Right.
couple of RFQs out there, none of them were respondent, so this extends it for another fiscal year. Now the updated, what's it called, scope is being processed through procurement. I'm waiting for the final yay from MHC and the okay from the procurement, and then procurement will be able to get it out there in the ether and hopefully get a respondent. That list too, if you remember, we had a list of properties that we put together based on the survey plan, based on some of those old surveys that we had. We had 140 on there originally, so I did say in it 120. It'll be up to whoever responds to pick out which ones that they'll do, obviously with the commission's input. But we had to kind of get a reduction in the amount, because again, that whole Nantucket factor.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I'm glad that's moving forward.
Yes.
So that was, our fiscal year 23 funding, which we've had extended. We did not apply for funding for fiscal year 24 or 25, but for fiscal year 26 for the Massachusetts Historical Commission Survey and Planning Grant, if we wanted to apply for funding, the deadline for the pre-approval is November 19th. So we don't have to apply for funding for surveys in the way that, we did in 23 and 22. There are other projects for which we could apply for funding. One of them would be a preservation plan for the town, which Holly, I know, that's something that you think would be worthwhile.
I do, and thank you, Madam Chair. I think that would be a good idea because of where we're at from a planning perspective. You all know that the town has been working on their master plan. And the section to, historic and cultural resources, has been, updated. And I think that that would be something to kind of tie into that. It's been such a long time since that was updated. It will also take in the fact that we have a survey plan, which is a form of preservation planning to begin with, but the preservation plan could be more specific. It might also be an opportunity for the CLG together, since it would be obviously a CLG project, because want to make it a point that this funding is only being offered to CLGs this fiscal year. Mr. Steinitz from MHC specifically said that it would be for CLGs, which is a 60-40 instead of a 50-50, which is a little bit better, pretty cool. So it's kind of like, okay, on one hand, it's because of the uncertainty at the federal level of what's going to be allocated. But at the same time, MHC is wanting to encourage the CLG, so it's pretty good. I wanted to just bring you into that letter that was provided and the actual eligible projects. This one down here too, was something, you know, I don't know if it would be beneficial, but there's two things that come to mind on this one. And historic structures reports that may include the preparation or outline of plans and specifics for Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund. That is something that out of this town-owned historic resources survey that we're gonna be doing. Again, those are town-owned historic resources. A lot of them, if they're owned by the town and are rented, they're income producing. So there's something on that end, but municipalities are able to apply for this preservation projects fund. And this could be an opportunity to look at one of the town-owned historic resources that may need some additional work. So I know that there's been some ideas in the past. One was the Jetties Beach Pavilion that Peabody and Stearns from 1904. I don't know where that study has gone as far as from the resiliency perspective. You all remember a couple of years ago, the Parks and Rec, out of their Parks and Rec plan, we're looking at all three of the concession stands. Two of them are contributing historic resources. We have two of them that are located right in our flooding. We have our resilient Nantucket design guidelines. So within that study, I recommended that Parks and Rec have their consultant have a meeting. We had a meeting between the HDC and the Concom to kind of go, okay, here are these proposed projects. And I'm glad we did, because it kind of came out in an outcome that I thought would be the case. You know, from an HDC perspective, they wanted the property to be elevated. Concom wanted the building to be elevated. So it was kind of an eye opener, I think, for everybody's perspective. But I say this, that if the town wanted to move forward with looking at a feasibility from a preservation perspective, there is this funding source. And this fund would be to do a feasibility study on it, would help assist it. Again, this is kind of a big picture thing. I don't really know, nor do I know whether or not the funding that we could be asking for would be sufficient enough. So there may also be another project down the pipeline. I also was something I forgot to remind you all of. Yesterday, I was in this room for CPC, presenting our 4 projects that we submitted for the CPC's consideration. And before I was up, the NHA was here asking for their requests. And one of them is the mill, our historic iconic mill that we've all seen. And this was an idea as well, because, you know, it could be for assist this. I don't know if that would be something beneficial, because again, it says right here that if it's owned by a private nonprofit on the National Register, which that is, private nonprofit on the National Register, This is just an idea, just as a concept. I did not, and I'll discuss further with anybody or Niles from NHA, but again, is this something that we as a commission would want to assist NHA on? I don't know. So there's all these different things that are up in the air, what we could use this funding for. And I do think it is an opportunity to kind of say, okay, we've got these projects going on right now. Because again, we're gonna have 2 survey projects going on. We're gonna have the town-owned historic resources with Paleo West, and then we're gonna have hopefully a respondent on the MHC's 23 funding. It's an opportunity to look at doing a preservation plan now that the master plan is gonna be hopefully finalized soon. So just a couple things. Just wanted to bring it all to everybody's thought on the way to move forward. And then the pre-app is due November 19th, so we would want to kind of get an idea of what we want to do sooner rather than later.
Yes, because that is to our next regularly scheduled NHC meeting is the November 21st. So. Does anybody have thoughts on what sorts of projects? I think personally, the idea of doing a comprehensive preservation plan would be very beneficial for the island. And I think could maybe come as a, I appreciate what you're saying for this number 4, preservation plans of potentially town-owned resources, but maybe that could be something for fiscal year 27, once the surveys are done, from this wind fund that we have, that could, I
Right.
think, be useful for identifying which town-owned resources are in need of,
Yes.
rehabilitation.
I definitely agree with the preservation plan. And just getting as many resources surveyed as possible, whatever shape that takes. I'm curious who does the preservation plan? How does that work? First step is getting the money for it, but then
So
There's
it
an
would go
RF.
through the same exact process through
As the
procurement.
survey.
We would have to procure it.
And so on.
And more than likely, because the funding is coming from MHC, the MHC got it from Congress, we would still have to acquire a consultant that's on their list, of qualified respondents.
Yep.
So what that pool looks like, it may be similar to what we see from the survey effort. It may be a little bit more because you're also dealing with planning, not necessarily architectural history. So, but yeah.
Yeah, so far that sounds like the best way to use those resources.
Okay,
So are you to that?
did you have a comment?
Is it all right about?
Sure.
I'm also a member of the capital program committee, and just this week we were talking about the concession stand and at the jetties, the tennis part. I don't know if that was one of the historic buildings, but the town presented to us their plan to renovate that and add bathrooms this year, and the approached the capital program committee for money, and that's being considered. So in terms of the jetties beach happening at the same time, just wanted to highlight that there's already some revitalization, restoration.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Also, also on the board of the Brown Point Association, and in our last meeting, we were talking about the concession stand that I think is a historically noted at the Children's Beach.
Mhm.
And there was some confusion on our board as to, there was an understanding that it was going to be removed by the town, which I was under the impression that that was not the case. So just to let you be aware, there's some confusion about the local neighborhood association.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may on that, I did hear, thank you, Caroline, for that. That's extremely helpful because when we were having the discussion, that did come up. Charlie had mentioned that there was a thought of removing that building because of the flooding issues and all that and adapting it. And then possibly bringing food trucks in, but that was a big no-no with the entire neighborhood. As well as they didn't realize at the time that that is a contributing structure. And hello, there's, it's an income producing property, there's an appetite there. So I appreciate that. And then for Jetty's Beach, on our list that we put in the survey plan and for the consultant to look at, all of the existing surveys that are with Macris, which includes the tennis club building that's down there, that is contributing 1950. So yes, that would, we be looking at that. I guess I need to touch base with Charlie and then I'll make a
Sounds like it.
note. Thank you.
Okay, but it sounds like we have consensus as a board in terms of moving forward with, starting this, pre-approval letter, to meet this November 19th deadline to work on a preservation plan for the town. Okay, great. Holly, you and me too.
Would you all be able to make a motion on that regard?
Do I hear a motion to,
I make a motion to approve, that Holly goes forward and does the grant pre-approval for a town preservation plan.
thank you, Sarah. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so Sarah on your motion,
I,
Angus,
Aye.
George,
Fine.
Betsy, Barbara, Abby? Oh, we lost Abby. Okay. And I'm an I as well. So that is, that carries 6-0.
Awesome.
Great, okay. Next on the agenda, I think this is unfortunately going to be a short discussion, but we, the Civil War monument repair, we discussed last meeting, hopefully trying to get an answer from, Drew Patnode at the DPW on what is the status of that outstanding, has the town signed up on the repair at this point? Where have they gotten back the, granite? And then also looking into how can we prevent something like this from happening in the future? What can we do with our current insurance policy to ensure that the town has greater input on approving or choosing subcontractors who will be repairing our town-owned resources in the event that they are damaged and we have to go through this insurance process. Holly.
So I have not been able to reach out to Drew, unfortunately, since our last meeting. But I have put out a phone call to finance to find out, one, who do I need to talk to? I don't know if it's Brian or somebody below him that I could speak to on just understanding exactly that when it comes to the insurance.
Okay,
Function.
so we'll keep this on the agenda for next month and hopefully have more to talk about in November. And then we have a couple sort of more announcement type things. The National Association or Nantucket Association of Real Estate Brokers are having a workshop on November 29th, which Holly will be presenting at, and Angus, as well as Mary Bergman of Nantucket Preservation Trust.
Sarah's going to.
Oh,
October 29. Let's see about that.
yes, did I say November?
Mhm.
Okay. It says October on the agenda. Yeah, sorry, thank you, I misspoke.
Which is it?
It's October. It is October 29th. Yes, I'm sorry. And the sort of outline of what those two workshops will be are in the packet. Hillary, did you have a comment? Oh, you're muted.
Whoops, thanks, sorry. Thanks for recognizing, Madam Chair. I guess on the topic of NAREB, one of the big discussions in this training is always the preservation tax credits. And it's an important constituency to communicate with those about. So I guess I just wanted to respectfully disagree with Sarah, with full respect for Sarah's experience, having explored preservation tax credits for her project. They don't work for every project and every goal, but they've been, I mean, speaking as a board member of Preservation Massachusetts, Inc., preservation tax credits have done more for preservation in the state of Massachusetts than just about any other action other than the Historic District Act and creation of local historic districts. they really have saved a lot of buildings, and a lot of projects do use them. And the tax credit was doubled under the Affordable Homes Act of last year from 55 million to 110 million. So suddenly a lot of projects are getting funded with these state tax credits. And of course, the federal tax credit of 20% is by right. So they're not right for every project, but I just wanted to push back on the commission taking the view that, well, it's nice that this program exists, but it doesn't really work because you don't get enough back. It's a really popular program. So I'm now on the board of Preservation Massachusetts, Inc. We're having a retreat next week. And one of the things that I really want to work on with them is how can we make this program work better for people? I know it's not perfect, especially at the state program. So I'd love to get more feedback specifically about how we can address the faults while also getting the word out and supporting that it is an important program that does work. You just have to get it early enough so that the project hasn't been progressed and then the person's trying to apply and then they might not qualify.
Thank you. Sarah?
So I just want to clarify in that it's a great program. My experience, both here and also in other states working with that, is that it's a great program for much larger commercial. We're saving a mill building and it's going to be mixed use and it's, part of a downtown environment. And it's a much bigger project, much bigger numbers. So what I was speaking to directly isn't necessarily my specific project and where that ended up in the process. It's more of from the standpoint of a historic structure that's going to be a rental because it needs to be income producing is a home, because we don't really have a lot of historic structure apartment buildings or mixed use properties here where it would be used for. And so what I was saying is that economically, the numbers that are required to rehabilitate a property of that size and then what you potentially would get back doesn't necessarily make sense. And the projects that it has benefited, I guess I would ask you, are they generally much larger scale, mixed use properties, throughout the state?
Hillary, would you
Is
like
that
to
a question
respond?
for me? Oh, yeah. So I'd have to do some research to answer that. I don't have all that. But yes, of course, the inventory of projects are generally much larger, and most of it is for housing, and it's often combined with other tax credits like affordable housing tax credits or, the investment zone in certain cities that have been targeted to be able to take advantage of that. But on Nantucket, the numbers aren't big, but we have had tax credit programs for rentals come through. There's one down on Easton Street or somewhere around there. And then there've been maybe 4 or 5. So I just think that when you talk to the realtors, I think you can truly tell them that there have been a spate of projects recently that the tax credit has doubled so that it's more accessible. And then, maybe we can do some work to answer the questions Sarah's asking and really get into a position of firmly promoting this program.
Thank you. And yes, I think it is definitely something worth making, the real estate agents aware of, and especially the fact that it has doubled for the state program.
I think there's no question, and we definitely support historic tax credits. I would think this entire commission would be on the outside of a preservation easement or restriction. Historic tax credits, in my opinion, are one of the best things because we're also protecting interior character defining features that the HDC wouldn't necessarily have jurisdiction over, but on Nantucket, they have been homes, they have been income producing rental, short-term rental. That's just the nature of the beast here. We haven't really seen anything for historic tax credits that I'm aware of other than the Point Breeze or Nantucket Hotel. And that was before this newly reenacted commission was together. But I will note that This past year, Epsilon Associates, who is the consultants that we have seen submit these applications to Nantucket or to the state before Nantucket, have said, you know, the state's not really providing that much specifically for Nantucket as well. So I don't know what that is, you know, where that stands. Preservation Action, I've mentioned this before, the nonprofit that pushed the lobbyists at the federal level. If you all are not members, I'd highly recommend it. They'll send you little stickers. I became a member earlier this year because it's something I've been remiss in doing, but my point is they are the ones that are really pushing the federal level, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of locals on Nantucket that have, you know, there's elderlies that have a historic structure or older structure, don't have the means, don't have the wherewithal to be able to do things appropriately. Even something down to windows and getting the character defining Nantucket monthly profile that are, you know, anyway, I digress, but the point is this commission in the past has talked about having revolving funds. That's great and all, it's gonna be very difficult, but if maybe there was a way with tax credits that would help people that are actually living in their homes versus having to rent them out, so just a thought. Yeah. Anyway, we'll definitely talk about that, and so I wanted to just mention, yes, we are all set. NARAB is mentioning reminding them of who from this board will be there. So yeah, we're looking forward to that on the 29th.
Okay, and Hillary, your hand is up.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that the planning board next week is having a meeting that I just learned about yesterday, where we have to work out legislation locally for accommodating the state's new by right ADU provision. And this intersects with the discussion of historic homes, because as we know, there are many historic homes that were multifamily at some point in their history, and they could be multifamily again. And now you can create an ADU in your, well, you can create it attached, detached, internal. But as far as the historic homes that might be able to easily be adapted to have an internal apartment or an internal ADU, you can do it just with a building permit now. You don't need a planning board permit, and you don't need, if it doesn't make any exterior changes, you don't need HCC approval. And this is something that might be relevant for talking with NARAB about, and we're going to be working on it next week. It'll be a public meeting because now the whole planning board has been invited, and it's going to be with the EOHLC and our town council. So that could be interesting for people to know about.
Thank you. That does sound interesting. Great. Okay. So, then another just sort of announcements. There are 2 upcoming, training opportunities that, for us to potentially attend. The Eastern Massachusetts Historical Commission Coalition has a workshop exploring historic district bylaws, guidelines, and rules. That's, on October 21st. And then the National Alliance of Preservation Commission has a workshop that is integrating preservation into municipal and planning processes on October 30th. So especially as we're going through this master planning process, I think that sounds very interesting, and hopefully members of our commission can attend, hopefully members of PLUS potentially could attend as well. So mark your calendars for those, and I encourage everyone to register if you can. So we had our commission goals, which, you know, Abby normally walks through and edits. Given that, how are we on time? I think we've discussed a lot today. I might just work with Abby offline and potentially update a couple of these.
Yeah.
If that, just because we don't have the capability of updating this document on the fly right now. Holly, did you have any?
I did want to mention that, so ICC-ROM, ICOM, I can never pronounce their acronym.
ICROM?
Yeah, ICROM, there we go. So as you're aware that this is their, I think, 2nd or 3rd year now on Nantucket. I had the benefit, along with Mary Bergman and Charles Johnson from the town, to talk to them, introduce, like, their students from all over the world. You have students from India, Japan, South Africa, Jamaica, I mean, everywhere, there's about 15 of them, and great students. They're in the cultural resource aspect of preservation, learning and using Nantucket as their classroom, which is pretty cool, but from more of also from a conservation side, so they're learning a lot, they're meeting a lot of people. My point is that they're gonna have their final presentations at the Whaling Museum. And I know I received an email from either Niles or Glenn, but I will find out exactly the date and time to send to you all. So I want to mention that.
Yeah, those were very interesting last year, and
Yeah.
I'm sure they will be this year too. Okay, so moving on from the commission goals, we had the approval of our minutes from our September 19th meeting. Did anyone have any edits or changes to those minutes? Barbara, I did correct the spelling of your last name. Thank you.
I'd make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so Angus on your motion,
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
George? Aye. Betsy?
Aye.
Barbara? I'm an aye as well. Great. So those minutes are approved. Is there any other business? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion made by Betsy. Is there a second? Seconded by George. Betsy on her motion.
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
George? Aye. Angus?
Aye.
Sarah? I'm an aye as well. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. See you November.